Welcome again to What's It To Ya? Alongside the faithful Jack Worth, I am Carter Woodeel. On this week's edition of the show, we'll be taking our thoughts on the Richie Incognito Jonathan Martin scandal in the NFL. We'll take a look at the BCS standings and how they could change in the future. And in the debate of the week, we'll be talking about Derek Jeter's new contract and whether or not it was the right move for the Pinstripers. But we start on the basketball court. The New York Knicks and the Brooklyn Nets have both had troubles starting off the season this year. The Knicks are facing some serious difficulties on the interior with Tyson Chandler out with an injury, and the Nets just don't seem to be gelling as a team. Jack, both fan bases are not pleased with how the season has begun, but which slow start surprises you the most?
I think that's a really good question because I think these are two teams that are struggling for two really different reasons. And as a Nets fan, it's with this team that's as new as they are, you want to say that you're not panicking, but personally I'm panicking. Especially because you don't just look at the record, but you look at how they got there, losing by 20 to teams like Orlando and Sacramento. And it's like, you understand that even though they may not have the chemistry yet, they may not have gelled, like Carter said, this is a team that should, on talent alone, be able to beat Sacramento and Orlando, especially after that win over Miami. It shows that even if they're not fully ready to play together, they have enough guys that should just be able to put the ball in the net enough times to beat the Kings.
Yeah, it's hard not to panic if you're a Nets fan, I think, after all of the hype that was generated at the start of the season with the new acquisitions with Jason Kidd at the head coach. But I think that if this was a team that didn't beat Miami, then that would be one thing. But I think that since they came in and pulled out that victory against the Miami Heat, that's enough to make me think the losses against Orlando and Sacramento are going to happen earlier in the season. But I don't think that in the future they're going to become fewer and farther between. I still agree with you though that just given all the hype and all the expectations, this is a more surprising slow start I think for the Nets than with the Knicks.
I agree, and I think also if you look at the Knicks are a team that in the same boat as the Nets in terms of early season struggles, but I think is more it's sort of agreed across the league that they're going to they're going to rise in the standings to an extent. I think the Nets have a higher upside and more potential to lose more games. I think if you look at the Knicks right now, especially with Tyson Chandler out, this is a team that really just isn't that strong. I mean, I think it's a team that's a playoff team, especially in a weak Eastern Conference. But the Knicks right now really they have Andrea Bargnani starting at center. And, I mean, if you're looking at a five-man lineup, that puts Carmelo Anthony at the power forward. So your two big men have combined for 9 rebounds a game last season. And Bargnani, notoriously a poor defender. And they're even starting him on Shumpert at the 3 to, complete that small lineup. So the Knicks are a team that, obviously, I think they're surprising people because they're the Knicks and they're losing. And the Knicks will always have such high expectations regardless of who's on their roster. But just sort of looking from the outside in, objectively speaking, I think the Knicks have a lot of problems. And, to me, the fact that they're starting off, under 500 through these first 8-10 games of the season isn't even that surprising, especially with the loss of Chandler.
Yeah, it's interesting to see just how people pin the loss of Tyson Chandler, how much they attribute that to the Knicks' slow start to the season. The question of if he was on the floor, how well would they be playing? Certainly, with Bargnani starting at center, it's not what you would want, although in terms of just straight-up man-to-man coverage, he's not all that bad a defender. He's pretty good. But if you're talking about help defense inside, he's a big liability. And I think that for the Knicks, they really would like Tyson Chandler to be on there on the floor, but at the same time, it makes it less of a surprising start to the year.
And I totally agree with that because Chandler only played a couple games before getting injured, so it's really easy, especially if you're a Knicks fan, to say that these early season losses are because of they don't have Chandler, they don't have their interior defensive presence. But really, we don't know that for sure. That's a lot of speculation that's just saying the Knicks are losing because Chandler's not in there. There's no way that they'll be a bad team, which I think will sort of keep them in that range of, mediocrity. They're not going to blow up the ship yet, which I think if you ask a couple Knicks fans, they wouldn't be totally against. But let's move on to teams that already have blown up the ship but notched their first victory last weekend. The two winless Florida football teams, Tampa Bay Buccaneers and Jacksonville Jaguars, each notching their first W of the season.
Yeah, boy, it's a really sad state of affairs for Florida NFL right now. with the Bucks and the Jaguars celebrating their first win of the year, and the Miami Dolphins, which we'll get to later in the show, in a state of just the team is falling apart. It's being under so much scrutiny. It's good to see a couple of Florida teams get some victories to start the year. To start off their year, they turn a new leaf for the Florida teams.
Yeah. Although one of the wins came at the expense of another Florida team, but I think the Jacksonville Jaguars, played a game. If you're a Titans fan, that's absolutely a crushing loss because the Titans, one of those. There's a plethora of teams right now in the NFL in that 4-4, 5-4, 4-5 range that can all sort of say that they think they could make the playoffs. So if you're a Titans fan, a week ago, right in the middle of that, you're looking at your schedule saying, you know what, we got Jacksonville at home. This is a great way. Let's take this win and move from maybe a team that's on the outside but has a chance to maybe a team right in the thick of things. And what do? They come out against Jacksonville and lose to the Jaguars. And this really hurts. Not just obviously it's a loss in a race that's so tight for this last AFC wildcard spot, but the psyche of this team. It's hard for me to look at how they're going to come back to losing at home to pretty much the worst team in football.
How many wins these Jags and Bucks get over the course of the remainder of the season could play a big part in the playoff picture going into the NFL. But let's talk about this upcoming week 11 in the National Football League. How about your upset pick?
My upset pick is another team that's sort of flown under the radar. Maybe hasn't had as much success as the Panthers this season, but a team that I've really been following and really liking. So this week, my upset pick is Josh Gordon and the Cleveland Browns to take down the defending champion Baltimore Ravens.
They're technically those guys. Yeah, I know how much you love the Cleveland Browns. I totally understand how much you love the Cleveland Browns. I think that everybody should love the Cleveland Browns. They've been a heartwarming story, but I don't think they win this game. I think that it's a case of the trendy pick going too far. I think in Carolina it has merit, and I don't think it has merit in this situation. For my upset, personally, you mentioned it's a surprising spread with the Chiefs and the Broncos, and I'm going to go against it. And I'm going to say that Kansas City wins this game. And I understand.
No points.
No, I'm not saying they beat the spread. I'm saying they win the football game.
Okay.
And I totally understand why you think I'm going to be wrong, and I very well may be wrong, but I think that this Chiefs defense, like the entire team, and its 9-0 record, is very underrated. And I think that Peyton Manning, while he's had a great year, nobody has seen this defense. You know what I mean? And he hasn't seen a defense like this before, and I think there's a chance that he gets rattled, and I think KC wins.
No, and I do think you're right. I think this is a game that the Chiefs are going to be in, which I think might surprise some people. I think I'm picking the Broncos for football reasons, which I think some people are not, because the Broncos are getting the what I like to call the Patriots effect, which goes back to 2007 Patriots.
Okay.
You look at this team that keeps winning, and in your mind you start to think they're unbeatable. And it doesn't matter who they play, but you just say, okay, Patriots, in this case the Broncos, are playing X this week. Let's chalk them in for another win. So I think this year's Denver Broncos team could start to have a case of that in terms of fans. So I totally see where you're going in terms of the Chiefs winning that. I like that pick a lot.
It's going to have a playoff atmosphere.
Yeah.
It's going to be really cool to watch.
I don't have the courage to make that kind of pick.
Mm-hmm. Well,
I admire your courage.
Well, thank you very much. Let's look at the courage of one of the people who posted on our Facebook page over the past week, our social media question of the week. It comes from Joe. He asks us, what do you think about the strength of the Big Ten Conference this year in football? How do you think this will affect Big Ten teams' BCS Bowl bids come December? And also, do you think the SEC is stronger or weaker overall this year than it has been? Let's look at the Big Ten first. This sounds like it's coming from an Ohio State fan. The Ohio State Buckeyes have taken a lot of flack for not having a very good schedule compared to teams from the SEC and from other conferences. The Big Ten is having a down year with the exception of the Buckeyes. And the big question is, what is the scenario where we can find Ohio State play for a title? And it's hard to find one right now, because if Florida State somehow loses, they'll take the place, probably, right?
Yeah.
But if Alabama somehow loses, then, the team that beat Alabama suddenly is vaulted into the category that Ohio State is in now. And if you've got a one-loss SEC team and an undefeated Big Ten team, the one-loss SEC team tends to win. So it's really hard for me to see a scenario, fair or not fair, that puts Ohio State in the title game.
Yeah, I mean, I think you said it. I think that Alabama place that they take right now in the championship game right now is Alabama Florida State. Even if Alabama loses, I see that place remaining as SEC champion.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in this world we live in 2013, when you win the SEC championship, whether you go undefeated like Alabama may do, or whether you lose one game but can take down a team like Alabama, and going 7-1, 8-1 in the SEC means you're taking down teams like Missouri and Texas A&M. That vaults an undefeated Ohio State team.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. For over the past few years, and luckily not in the future because we're going to have the new playoff system, but the SEC title game has consistently been a national semifinal game. If you make it into the SEC, if you win the SEC title game, barring some crazy circumstance, you're in. You're going to play for the title because they want to have an SEC team in there, and because it almost always means a big win against a big team on the last week of the season where wins are worth more.
And I mean, Ohio State, if you're a Big Ten, whether you agree with this situation or not,
right.
Obviously, if you're a big, I never understood the argument. If you're a fan of a team, you're rooting for your other teams in your conference to be good. I'm still up in the air on that one.
I think the SEC has a culture like that,
okay.
But I don't understand.
Like an Ohio State fan, are they rooting for other Big Ten teams to do well to boost Ohio State's resume?
I don't think it's the way it is in other conferences like the way it is in the SEC.
Okay. Because the Big Ten, if you're an Ohio State fan, then let's ignore the rest of Big Ten fans. If you're an Ohio State fan, I can understand how this seems wildly unfair.
It's completely unfair. In a perfect world, if we have a one-loss SEC team and an undefeated Big Ten team, the Big Ten team deserves a chance at the title. If we've got two undefeated teams, that are at the top of the BCS standings, they should play for the title, but I don't see it happening. And, it's the last year. We'll have the selection committee decide it. The second part of that question, the SEC stronger or weaker overall this year than it has been? I think the answer is yes, especially because you mentioned Missouri and Texas A&M were the first two names you came up with for these SEC contenders. They weren't in the conference a little while ago. And so that really shows how these new teams where everybody said, they're going to be out of place in the SEC, they're not going to really fit in, they're right there with the big boys.
Yep. I mean, as usual, 1 through, it's not 12 anymore, it's 14 now, 1 through 14. The SEC's got strong teams. Earlier in the season, they set the record with 8 teams in the top 25. They've got 7 in this week's BCS top 25, which really is quite impressive when you can say 50% of your teams in your conference are in the nation's top 20%, especially when they have to play each other each week. Mm-hmm. So it's impossible to have 7 SEC undefeated teams with 0 losses or 1 loss. So I think the strength of this conference, you're an SEC hater or lover, which there really seems to be no middle ground. It's very hard to argue that the Southeastern Conference really has a chokehold on college football.
And similarly to the way the national title game is picked, whether it's good or bad, it's the way it is.
Yeah.
And we will be taking a short break for right now. When we come back, we're talking Jonathan Martin and Richie Incognito, and also Derek Jeter's new contract. Stay where you are.
My songs know what you did in the dark.
Slow down.
Slow down and move over.
And move over.
When you see lights, vests,
Or reflectors.
Please, give us some room. Slow down and move over.
when you need us.
We've got your back.
Do you have ours?
You got our back?
You got ours? You got our back? Please, slow down.
And move over.
Hi everybody, and welcome back to What's It To. Zach's still here, I'm Carter, and I'm still here. And we're going to switch gears now to the National Football League and the story that has been dominating NFL coverage for the past few days, for the past week. The Richie Incognito and Jonathan Martin scandal. For those of you who aren't caught up on the exact details, Jonathan Martin and Richie Incognito are both offensive linemen for the Miami Dolphins. Jonathan Martin left the team because he felt he was being bullied by Incognito and other members of the team. And we later found out that Incognito had been sending Martin threatening text messages, threatening voicemails, things that threatened his family, threatened his sister. And then, of course, he comes out and says he's not a bully on a TV interview. It's a really strange situation, Jack. I want to know what you think about this.
And it's a situation that has so many levels. And before we talk about it, I do want to apologize as best I can to the fans of the Miami Dolphins.
Absolutely.
Who 2 weeks ago, especially after that win over Cincinnati, were a team, again, right in the middle of that playoff contention gray area. A team that, for about 24 hours had a lot to look forward to. And if you're a Miami Dolphins fan, because this season, whether you want to accept it or not, this season will now be consumed by this story.
Yeah. And the fans are not happy about it.
No.
Jeff Ireland's phone number was actually leaked on the internet, and fans have been spamming his voicemail, which I think is totally legitimate. It's a really weird and story that the fans did not ask for at all.
It is, and because it's such a story that everyone in the organization is at fault. It's one of those rare stories where, since everyone is to blame, the only people that really you can feel bad for really here are the fans.
The NCAA would call this lack of institutional control.
And I think those are perfect words to describe what happened, because top to bottom, Jeff Ireland to Richie Incognito and everyone in between, no one did the right thing here.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, the real headline of this story, which has been 3 words that have been thrown around all throughout this week, and 3 words that have been used to mean nearly anything, and have been used as almost this safety net to say, you know what, it's okay because of this.
Yeah.
And those 3 words are locker room culture.
Locker room culture, locker room culture, We've just been hearing so much about it, and it seems like they act like moral laws and actual on-the-books laws do not apply because of the locker room culture. And it's really strange how a lot of people are coming out in defense of Incognito, saying, well, in a locker room, you got to take it like a man. Go up and punch the guy, which is ludicrous to me to say, oh, well, you go up and punch him, which I believe Jeff Ireland said, as a solution to the problem, because Richie Incognito is a huge dude. I would not want to punch that guy. I would not punch that guy. And even if I'm as big as he is, I'm still not going to punch that guy. And it seems like, well, he's the man, that's what he has to do. This is the role that's been enforced by society and enforced by the locker room culture. It's really strange and kind of sad to see that in this locker room, and most likely in other locker rooms in the NFL, that's the way people are addressing it.
And I think when you really take a step back and look at even using the excuse as locker room culture is terrible.
Mm-hmm.
You have these NFL players saying, we get to be... I mean, Richie Incognito from an outside has borderline personality disorder. Mm-hmm. But it's okay because in the NFL that's accepted, and it's NFL fans or NFL players, excuse me. Talking about why they're telling the people that that's a culture that's accepted in the National Football League, because I mean, the real thing is the societal view that we have of these players.
Yeah.
And the society, why is football the most popular game in America? Because it's a game that, if you're a strong alpha male, big personality, football's the game for you. And as America, we like that. So I think it's a game that I don't want to say encourages, but it'll let that happen, because boys will be boys, and that's what happens if you're a football player.
Brandon Marshall of the Chicago Bears, to his enormous credit, made a great point about this, saying, well, if a little boy falls down and you can see he's starting to cry, we tell him, no, stop crying, be a man, be tough. If a little girl does the same thing, we say, oh, it's okay. We validate the words that Marshall used were, we validate their feelings. And it's gender roles that people learn from birth, that and quoting Marshall again, it's that times 100 for football players, and it's really it makes you wonder, can it ever be changed? Is this avoidable?
And I think and it is a league wide epidemic. Brandon Marshall, more credit to him for standing out, but if you look at the view of this incident in terms of NFL players compared to how this incident is being viewed by the people of the United States. Yeah. I know other NFL players, in a surprising number, are standing up for Richie Incognito, which is not okay.
Yeah, it's absolutely exasperating. It's a sad story, but how about we clear our heads for a minute and let's move to baseball. Let's move to the debate of the week.
Okay.
Derek Jeter with a new $12 million contract for the Yankees. It means that he's going to be paid $2.5 million roughly more come next season than he would have had they picked up his player option on his existing contract. But in terms of a luxury tax, it actually saves the Yankees money in the eyes of the tax because the average value of his old contract was greater than the one of his new one. It's a complicated issue. I think we agree on that. But is this the right move for the Yankees?
If the Yankees, which I think was always in their intent, to keep Derek Jeter around, then it is the right move because they are saving money in the luxury tax. I think that to the outside eye it might look strange that they're paying him more but also saving more. The Yankees handled the situation well for getting Derek Jeter. My issue is, could the Yankees have instead of just working out the Jeter situation, could they have spent that $12 million elsewhere?
But I feel like keeping Derek Jeter on the field in a Yankee uniform is a huge priority for the New York Yankees, and it should be a huge priority for the New York Yankees. It's not like he's an on-field liability. The guy hit .316 last year, or 2 years ago, rather. Last year, he was playing hurt all year, and obviously his productivity dropped. But I think saying Derek Jeter, now he's a year older, his production's just going to fall off a cliff. I don't think there's any merit to that. He could have some regression, for sure. He might not be able to play every day, but Joe Girardi is an excellent manager when it comes to managing veterans and managing playing time, and I don't see why this isn't a great move for the Yankees. They save luxury tax money, and they keep Jeter around. It's a win-win.
Well, because I think this is the Yankee team that has so many question marks. I mean, and Derek Jeter, as much as as much of a player that he's been over nearly 20 years with this organization, is a question mark. Whether you want to argue that or not, he is a question mark. This is a guy who had 8 hits last season, is coming off an injury, and will be 40 years old. He's a question mark. And $12 million to Derek Jeter, in my opinion, can't just be justified by saying, because he's Derek Jeter.
I think it can be, because he's Derek Jeter. But also because I think that Derek Jeter getting older is a different situation than the average Major League player getting older. And I think that Derek Jeter being a question mark, he's less of a question mark than he would be if he's the average Major League player. And I understand that, but think about what happens if they say, okay, let's let Jeter walk. Think about what would happen if Jeter, say, comes back to, a reasonable fraction. Let's say he's 85% of what he was in 2012. Say the guy hits like 300 and gets a decent amount of hits for another team. Can you imagine what the Yankees would look like if they sent one of their best players in the history of their franchise to some other team and he wound up doing well when they could have kept him and saved money in the luxury tax?
You just said it. The Yankees suffer from the same syndrome that the Chicago Cubs suffer from, where it doesn't, sometimes you have to make decisions that it doesn't matter if it looks bad now or if it doesn't matter what it looks like. If the Yankees think that they can legitimately be a better baseball team by letting Derek Jeter walk, then they have to do that.
But I think that it's negligible enough to say so they carry some merit to throw him out the window. How are the Yankees going to look? If you're signing a free agent, I feel like keeping Derek Jeter around is something the Yankees should do unless there's, it reminds me of like a college football replay, unless there's clear and convincing evidence to the contrary. I think you should side with keeping Derek Jeter in pinstripes. And I don't think there's clear and convincing evidence that says that Derek Jeter is going to be a huge liability come next season. And I think he's going to be a fine shortstop. He's not going to be incredible, but he's going to be good enough. He's going to be good, comparable, compared to the other guys that are going to fry into the free agent market, I think.
And I don't argue with Derek Jeter's merit, but I argue, if the Yankees 5 or 6 years ago were in the same situation and they made this move, I think I would be more okay with it. But when I look at the state of the Yankees, and they're saying that they need to cut money and they need to sort of get under this luxury tax, and they're cutting $2 million when they could have cut $12 to $14 million. I think we're getting
a higher replacement shortstop.
We're okay, but I think $12 million could be better spent. I think we can both agree on that in terms of on-the-field productivity. But the fact that we're trying so hard to cost money, to save money, to cut money, but Derek Jeter's extension isn't even something that's on the table. I think you get these conflicting views from the Yankees where, oh, we have to save money, but not when it comes to the untouchables like Derek Jeter.
But there are other places to save money. For example, they're saving a ton of money, presumably when A-Rod gets suspended for the year. That's a ton of money right there. Andy Pettit's contract is now gone. That's a lot of money saved. Getting under 189 is now easier for the Yankees, I think, than it was pre-A-Rod suspension. And I think, coming back to this again and again, but if you're going to make a decision on, okay, where are we going to make a business decision? Where are we going to say, okay, here's where we're going to cut costs? You're not going to put Derek Jeter near the top of your list. The Yankees are not going to, cut Derek Jeter on a business decision like he would with the average major league player. Derek Jeter is not the average major league player.
Well, but
He's Derek Jeter.
What does that mean?
But it means
it's a business. It is a business though, and everything should be a business decision.
Okay,
the Yankees shouldn't have to make one or two business decisions. They should just be making business decisions.
Okay, but for business, do you think that more fans or less fans are going to turn out if Derek Jeter goes to another team? Do you think that more fans are going to turn out if Derek Jeter comes back, triumphant return to the season? How do you think that's going to affect their ticket sales?
If you let Jeter walk, and let's say they make the playoffs, I think fans are going to show up.
I think more fans will show up if Jeter's still on the team.
I think that if you're the Yankees with this monster TV deal and sponsorships and marketing, business is winning games. I don't think they're the type of team that needs to sell jerseys to make some money.
I completely disagree with that. I think the Yankees are focused on making money above all else, especially with Jordan Steinbrenner now no longer with us. I think but we'll see. It's a great debate to be having. But we are running out of time here on What's It To You, and I'd just like to talk about something baseball related that's been getting just been grinding my gears lately. It's when a TV announcer, a talking head, somebody, a play-by-play guy in the studio, refers to an NBA team as a ball club, calls a football game a ball game, calls a non-baseball athlete a ball player. I don't like it. Those terms are reserved for baseball. And it may sound like this is a little nitpicky thing, and I will definitely admit I am more prone to get annoyed over that type of, over language imperfections than the next guy. But I feel like this represents something bigger. I feel like it represents baseball's connection to its past, something that the NBA and the NFL don't have, that they don't have nearly as good of a connection to the past. And I think these terms are something that should be kept to baseball, because baseball has earned its connection. Play ball is a baseball term. Ball player, ball game, ballpark, they're all baseball terms. And I think they get sullied, they get watered down if they're used in a different context. And if you don't care, then what's it to you? That's our show. We hope that you join us again next week. We will be on the air again. For Jack Worth, I'm Carter Wadil. Have a good day.